Hello. We are, it's probably going to be a smaller class today because we're not on the time that we've, not the time we've regularly called for, which is 8 o'clock on Wednesday. We're doing early this week because obviously tomorrow night's Tisha B'Av. So we'll just get started. And those who join along as it comes along, we'll just catch them up. So we're learning the Tomar Devora. And like we discussed last week, the Tomar Devora is based on the 13 attributes of Hashem, and specifically the 13 attributes of Micha. We have the 13 attributes of Moshe, the 13 attributes of Micha, and the 13 attributes of Micha are considered attributes, so to say, of healing for the soul, whereas the 13 attributes of Moshe are 13 attributes to save the body, to save the time Moshe Rabbeinu used it for survival of the Jewish people, the time of the Chet HaEgel. And the point that the Ramak teaches us is that he uses that very strong term. He says that the person is made in the tzura, in the form and the image of Hashem, and the image being how God behaves in this world. And if we have Hashem's form, meaning we have the body of a human is a reflection of the body, so to say, in the image of God. And so if we look like Hashem, but we don't behave like Hashem, he calls that mechur. He calls that very disgusting. And we're not talking about, again, deep issues of hate. We're talking about overlooking and being understanding to others' transgressions towards you. And so we haven't gone through any of the Mindos yet. We're going to try to go through maybe one or two today. And if those are following along in the different publications, but I posted the opportunity to use the Sefaria one. So we'd be holding the paragraph that starts with it's Tomar Devora Aleph, and it says a little bit of a base on the side. You could have the English Hebrew or just English or just Hebrew. It starts off with Ha'aleph, the first of the 13 attributes is Mi Kel Kamocha. So again, the 13 attributes we learned last week is Mi Kel Kamocha, Nosa Avan, V'Ovral Pesha, etc. I'm going to go through each one of them, and the way the Ramak does it is that the Ramak will first explain the Midah of Hashem, the attribute of Hashem, and how does this work vis-a-vis us and our relationship to Hashem, and then use it as a way to learn how we should behave with each other. So the first midah is ha'achas, is the midah of mi kel kamocha. So the first one is basically the name Kel. The name Kel of Hashem, Aleph Lamed, is a name of strength, is a name of koach. So he says the first name is Kel, which is the koach, and the prophet, so to say, Michas, is praising Hashem in his power, meaning what's the power? So he explains. So this is that Moira al Hayois HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that being that Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shumelech Nelav and Soivel Elboin. He's a king that accepts disgrace. A person disgraces. To be an olive is a person, olive, the root of the word olive or elbon is to be disgraced. So Hashem is a king that is being disgraced. So let's explain what that means. What does it mean that God is being disgraced? And he's soivel. Soivel, he tolerates it. He tolerates, he's so to say, okay, he's not okay, but he tolerates for the sake of his children, of the Jewish people, even though they disgrace him. So what does that mean? He explains. Ma sheloi yichilehu rayon, that he says that although the people that transgress against him and they offend God, it's not shelo yachelu rayon. It doesn't make sense. It's not logic. Rayon we can't understand it in our intellect. What it means that Hashem is soivel, he tolerates our transgressions. Why? So he explains what it means. Hari ein davar nister mahashkachase belief safek. It goes without a doubt, belief safek, without a doubt, There's nothing nister. There's nothing hidden from Hashem's watch. It means there's nothing that happens in the world that Hashem is not aware of. So any action that's happening, Hashem sees what's happening. Even if a person does it in a way that person, he or she, tries to hide what they're doing. But Hashem sees it. He sees the chatoim, he sees the sins that are done against him. So there's 2 points. One point is God sees everything. Nothing that happens that is beyond God's understanding, and so to say, if you want to use the term vision of Hashem. And aside from that, point number 2 is that Ein Rega, there's not a moment that Adam, that any human being in this world is not Nizon, doesn't sustain himself or herself. Nizon is from the word mazon, like food. Umiskaim koyach elyon hashefeya alav, and exists from the koach. So this is now, we're connecting to the idea of kel, which is koach, which is strength. That there's, our whole existence is because Hashem makes it so that we should exist. So he's giving us life. So aside from Hashem knowing that we try, so it means if you want to say Hashem, so say a king, and there's chas v'shalom, the idea that there's a distance between the creator and the creation, between Hashem and his people. So he sees everything, but here it goes even deeper. Not only does he see everything, he gives life to everything. So nothing exists. There's no life that exists outside Hashem's choice to give life to that person. And the point being is, even while this person is doing a transgression, he uses the word elboin, that is it's almost like violating Hashem, insulting Hashem. And he says like this. So Ein Reger, again, there's no moment. Shalaya Adam Nizan, that person doesn't have mazan, doesn't sustain him or herself, and exists if not for the koach elyon and the strength of Hashem, hashafaya love, that gives this person flow. The word shafaya is from the word shefa, which is flow, which is an expression used for the flow of life force that is given to every person to be alive. Meaning to say, what are we seeing from this statement? That all Hashem would have to do is to stop giving life if a person is insulting him. Elbon is insulting, doing a transgression against him, and instead he's soivel, he tolerates it. So much so he tolerates it that he continues to give life to the same person, as the person continues or can be in a moment of insulting him. By Timsa, so from here we see Shmi Oilim Leichata Adam Negdoi, there's no such thing, doesn't exist, that a person is not doing a sin against Hashem. That God is not at the same moment giving this person, he or she, shefa, flow, meaning a flow of life that gives kiyum and gives existence, utnua seivarov, a movement of this person's limbs. So the person is using, literally, if you're using your body in a way that's violating, that's insulting Hashem, the movements of yourself, whether it's using your mouth to say something that's offensive or other things that a person could do, is that it takes koach to do anything, to have any movement. He's going to give an example in a second where Hashem was not tolerant. In the case of Yeravim ben Nevat. In the case of Yeravim ben Nevat, when Yeravim ben Nevat, who was the first king who broke off from the house of David and started the kingdom of Israel, known as the kingdom of the north in Eretz Yisrael, and there was a moment in the beginning of his rule when Hashem was trying to bring him back, that Hashem froze his body. It means he took away the koach, the ability to move. So we see, obviously Hashem can if he chooses to. But nevertheless, if the very fact that a person is still able to have even just body movement, and that movement could be involved in something that's connected to sin, that's connected to insulting him. Nevertheless, at the same time, God is giving the person that ability to do those body movements. So he says, that this person has an ability to have movement in their limbs. Notwithstanding, that the person is not just that God is like a person is giving a person a gift, and like you give a second gift, right? You give someone something, the person does something back to you. The person is using that same gift, the actual gift of life and energy, and that energy itself is being used as in a way to insult Hashem. So a person is using that same koach, that same strength, to insult, to the word elbowing, to insult and violate. Nevertheless, God doesn't withhold. So God continues, and it's not because, like we're gonna, person may think that God is giving, so to make the transgression larger. You continue to give and allow the person to continue to use his or her free choice to continue to abuse the strength that Hashem gives us, and to continue to insult him. That's not what he says. He says he's not leimanu klal mimenu klal. He doesn't hold it back because of he's a giving God. And this all is an expression of God's savlanus. Savlanus is tolerance. Hashem is soivel. He tolerates this insult, and the insult is double, right? There's two insults here. One is the sin itself, and the second is that the actual ability to do the sin comes from Hashem. That Hashem empowers the person, gives the person the strength to do good things with the strength that's given to them, and instead of that, that same person is using the strength to offend Hashem. But he tolerates this insult. So God, nevertheless, notwithstanding of how the person abuses the strength that Hashem gives him or her, is that mashpia by koyach, he gives this person strength with tnuas sevarav, and continues to allow this person to have body movement, even though the person's choosing to use their body movements in a way, like in many different kind of ways. If you hit someone, you scream at someone, you do something else, there's so many things that you need koach to do, right? Nevertheless, this person chooses to he uses, the word moitzi is like he takes. Osa koach, this strength that God gives this person, at this moment, to sin and transgress, umachis, and to anger. Nevertheless, notwithstanding, even if the person's intent is not out of weakness, so to say, of I tried God, but I can't restrain myself. But machis, even if the person's doing it knowing at the same time that he or she is machis from the word kas, angering Hashem, trying to anger Hashem. Nevertheless, God is a savlan. He tolerates this. In general, there's a terminology used for a person who's a savlan. There's such a kind of way to characterize a person as being a savlan. A savlan, by definition, is a person who he or she is sovel, tolerates abuse, tolerates. So sometimes that's obviously not healthy and on an extreme level. But savlan is usually a person. It's not so much a person that's weak or a person that's just being quiet to abuse. But savlan is also a person that can react and chooses not to, and therefore they're sovel. They tolerate. So he says, "V'loi Tomar." So a person may think that the reason why God doesn't interfere, so to say, in how a person takes advantage and misuses the koach that Hashem gives him or her, a person may think to say that that's because God made a system, so to say, that this is the way the world runs, and there's bechira chavshis, this freedom of choice, and therefore, based on the system of creation, so to say, God has reconditioned the situation that he's limited, so to say, that he cannot interfere, and therefore the person has unlimited ability to take advantage of the koach that Hashem gives him or her, and to use it even to lahachis, to insult, to anger, to violate Hashem. So he says, no, it's not the way it is. He says, v'loi Tomar, a person shouldn't think that Hashem can't withhold and interfere and hold back the koach, the strength that each person has on a moment-to-moment basis. It's not like Hashem puts a battery in a person, and once the battery is in the person, So the person is running off the energy of the battery, and the battery is separate from Hashem's constantly feeding the ability for a person to have movement and action. And so one shouldn't think that he can't withhold it. Chas, he uses the expression that and so therefore, and if that's the case, that God has no ability to interfere, so to say, so that he's not a savlan, he's not a tolerant, it's not a sign of tolerance. It's a sign of an inability, so to say, of interference. So therefore, it's not a sign that God is tolerant. Maybe he's not tolerant, but he made the world, so to say, in a way where a person has an ability to take abuse of the koach that's given to him or her. So it says, no, you can't say that. Chas v'chalila, God forbid, that a person should think that that's the way it is. Ela b'koichai b'rega k'memra. And it's within God's ability. It means the Ramak is obviously not coming to say that God has anything that doesn't allow him to do anything. We know God is called Kol Yachol, he can do anything. But so to say, there is a concept in the world called Seder Shalshlis, which means there's a system of creation. And God, so to say, set a rule book, and could be according to that rule book, he can interfere. He says, no, it's not like that. Chas v'chalila, el b'koichei b'rega k'memra, God, it's in God's ability, if he so chooses, to at any moment, b'rega k'memra means in any moment of, like just an utterance of a second, to interfere with this person and withhold from this person the koach. Nevertheless, he doesn't. And therefore, it's a sign that God's a sovereign. We're building up over here the midah, the power of tolerance. And the power of tolerance, not just of tolerance of general transgressions, but the power of tolerance to the extent that what you've been giving to a person has been used against you. And nevertheless, you're tolerant of that misuse of power, so to say. So he says, it's God forbid to say that God cannot interfere. So to say, to do what? For instance, the Yabesh Yadav Raglav, God could dry up the ability for a person to have movement in his or her hand, and therefore they can't use their feet or their hands if that's involved in a way of insulting Hashem. And where do we see in history that God interfered in a person's ability to continue to do wrong? Like God did to Yeravam. Yeravam again is the first king of Eretz Yisrael. That means of the kingdom of Israel, who broke off from the son of Shlomo, and he started a kingdom in the Shomron, known today as the north. And Hashem sends a Navi to Yeravam when he's standing there by the house of worship that he built for idols in Dan, I believe it was, or in the second one. And the Navi comes to prophesy about the coming of a descendant of King David HaMelech named Yoshiyahu, and Yoshiyahu is going to destroy the Baal. He's going to destroy all the negative that Yeravam brought into Eretz Yisrael. He's going to sacrifice, so to say, slaughter the false prophets on the altar of the idol. And Yeravam, you have to remember, Yeravam wasn't just an ignorant person. Yeravam was one of the most learned people of old times. It says that Achia Shaloni taught Yeravam secrets of Torah that weren't taught, that weren't heard of until the time of King Solomon. So we're talking about someone who was it was a huge Talmud Chacham, and he was a person that struggled with ego. The Gemara says that Yeravam's downfall was his ego, his tremendous ego. He couldn't take it that he would be second to the house of David, so instead he just tried to destroy the whole system. But at that moment of the prophecy, the story goes that we all know, who learned the story in the Navi, that his hand froze. He tried to strike the Navi, who said the prophecy, and his hand froze. So we see clearly the Ramak is using this story as an example that if God chooses, he can interfere. And the sefer that I'm using, that kind of gives a light commentary to the Tomar Devora. I'm not sure what his yisod for this is, but what he's saying is logical, that if the Ramak is building up a whole case that God is a savlan, he tolerates, and it's by choice, not that he can't interfere. So why did he interfere with Yeravam, right? If God is a savlan, he's tolerant, why wasn't he tolerant of Yeravam? And the answer being is, this according to the translation that I have over here, is that God is tolerant to most people. But someone like Yeravam that was hand chosen by God, God chose that the prophet Achia Shaloni should anoint Yeravam as the king, and he had high hopes for him. And we know the Gemara tells us many things of God's desire and hope for Yeravam even to do tshuva. He said, Chazar bach, do tshuva. And he wouldn't do tshuva because he would still be second to David. His ego really tripped him up, the Gemara says. So nevertheless, Yeravam, he's a king, and God doesn't tolerate someone like that because he was given an opportunity to be a leader, and instead he led the people astray. But in a regular person, God does not interfere. That's the way the Sefer I have has the understanding about the difference between the case of Yeravam and the case we're trying to make in our Midah here. So he continues, V'im kol zeh, nevertheless, notwithstanding, shehakoyach b'yodei lahachsir hakoyach hanishma, that it's within God's reach. He has the ability, he has the koach, he has the power to hold, to take back the strength that he gives a person that uses this strength to insult Hashem by doing sin. And God could tell a person. He's talking the language of the Tomar Devora is I'm not going to use the word basic, but it's very simple. In the Tomar Devora, the Ramak isn't getting complicated. He's just talking out a conversation. And he says, God could tell to the person, God could have said to this person, he or she, and could say all the time to anyone who's insulting Hashem by sin, you're sinning against me. Use your own strength. Why are you taking advantage of the gifts I give you, and not using them right, but actually turning them against Hashem? God gives us strength to do service in this world, to do Torah mitzvahs, and instead you're using it for abuse, and the abuse could be on all levels. I mean, he used the word hachis, to anger. I mean, it's just you're taking mamash a gift, and God could say, okay, listen, you want to do that, find your own source of strength. You're using my things that I'm giving you. Again, the Ramak is talking very simple over here, right? Use your own, you find your own strength. Why are you taking advantage of what I gifted you? Obviously, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a strength outside of Hashem. But in theory, which means to say Hashem could just stop giving a person strength. Nevertheless, God doesn't withhold from a person and continues to give the person the ability to make these choices. So he explains why. He tolerates elbain, this disgrace. And nevertheless, v'hishpia, again from the word shefa, he gives flow of strength, hakoach, v'heitiv l'adam tuva, and is good to the person. Notwithstanding the fact that the person is being arrogant and unappreciated and all the things that one could imagine. Again, what I find fascinating about the Tomar Devora is not so much the Ramak could turn this all in how we should be back to Hashem, that this should be a lesson that we shouldn't behave this way. And obviously, the lesson could be just talking to, when a person hears it so black and white, the person would say, why am I doing this? But he's not focusing on that. He's not going into the musar, so to say, of telling a person why you making these choices against Hashem. The lesson from here is all about ben adam l'chaveroi. And that's why he's talking, in my opinion, so plainly, because a lot of us may feel this way in our own relationships with people, that we empower, so to say, people to do things. We give them, whether it's our children or what have you, and then the person uses that same thing, and instead of being grateful, not just not being grateful, but they're using that same ability to be grateful, and instead of being grateful, being insulting. God gives only good. So he says, this is a way of taking an insult. And again, the key word here in this midah is savlanis, is tolerance, not patience. There's sometimes the word savlanis is used as patience, and here the word is tolerance. We're tolerating it. Patience would mean something differently. Patient would mean that a person is like, in the bigger picture, it's better to have patience. But here, savlanis, he means more he's tolerated. And again, he says, Ma'ashallah Yishar, it doesn't make sense. It's not logical almost. That's why we learned last week that the word was keser. God said, the Ramak says, use the keser, go into the keser. Keser is beyond logic, like Goldie pointed out last week. And that's why when the angels praise Hashem, they use the expression Melech Oluf, a king that's insulted. Nevertheless, notwithstanding, he doesn't take action, so to say, doesn't freeze. Now, again, this is not saying there's no such thing as char v'onish, punishment, reward, and that he's going to get into the next midah. And there's no such thing that there's not a play that God's waiting for us to do tshuva. That's not the focus. The focus is, why doesn't Hashem just stop allowing this person to transgress, to insult, right? You could imagine a person, you give someone money, you give someone something, and the person uses it. At one point, you say, I'm not. It's one thing if you're not going to do the right thing. It's another thing if you can use the money to throw it back in my face in a way of an insult. I'm going to stop giving it to you. Hashem doesn't do that. And this is what Micha says in the first of the attributes. Mi kel kamoicha, who's like Hashem? Who has the koach like Hashem? Ata kel bal chesed hameitiv. The word kel is also, the name kel of Hashem is the name that's connected to chesed. Chesed is giving. So nevertheless, Ata kel, you're giving bal chesed hameitiv. You're kind and doing good. Ata kel, you're a God. Bal koyach linkoim, you have the ability to take revenge. There's a difference, obviously, between the word nakama, revenge, and discipline. Discipline is not revenge. We like to view that all the schar v'onish in the world is discipline. Nakama is something else. Nakama is revenge. Revenge is not discipline. You could gather in the koach you give, but you don't do that. Nevertheless, you are tolerant, and you allow yourself to be insulted. Ad yashuv b'tshuva, hoping eventually the person will do tshuva. Okay, so this is the midah of Hashem, the midah of koach. The midah here is the savlonis, is the tolerance, and the tolerance in such a way that God doesn't withhold, even though He could just stop giving, and we wouldn't have the ability like He did to Ravim. He dried his hand. He couldn't use his hand to the koach that God gave him to strike the Navi. So what's the lesson for us? Now he goes into lesson for us. So Zoom Mida, this is a way, this is an attribute. This is an attribute that a person themselves have to behave in that way. Ritzaini, what do I mean to say? So what is the attribute again? What is the key word here? Hasavlanas, to be tolerant. Even in a way that you're insulted to the level that a person is insulting with the same strength that you give them, you're soivel, you're tolerant. And you should not, even the person you have to tolerate, and the person is being an olive, insulting, nevertheless, you're not going to withhold good from this person. It's like mamish, a person, my uncle once told me a story. There was a Yid in Yerushalayim, a couple actually, a family, a husband and wife. They had a lot of children, but they're an elderly couple. I think they obviously passed away many years ago, and they had an open house Friday night. Mamish, an open house Friday night. Anyone could come. And the people that chose to show up at their house were not necessarily balbatisha people. The people behaved nicely. The people that had nowhere else to eat, and they were angry, and some of them obviously not well, and they were very, very obnoxious, extremely obnoxious. Like he said, he was telling me that there was nothing that the husband and wife could bring to the table that was enough. If they had every kind of fish, why didn't you have another kind of fish? Why are you missing this dip and this chrein and this mayonnaise? Like literally, he was at the table and he said that the insults that this couple were taking, it was that they couldn't think of maybe something that someone else wanted. They were so apologetic, and they kept on trying to find and to accommodate. And at one point, a regular person would say, come on, you're eating at my house, Baruch Hashem, you have a meal, you have the basics, you have fish, challah, soup, because I missed out on the bits or the luction or this or that, and I didn't make the coleslaws the way you liked it, so therefore you're going to shower upon me abuse. And they were just doing b'sever panim. Then not only didn't they stop, or and it's very hard. That savlanis, tolerance while you're giving. See, to tolerate something in general is hard, but to tolerate while you're giving, like he's describing in this midah, that our giving is actually triggering it's the koach, it's the ability, it's the setting that you set, which is allowing for the person to even have a setting to abuse you. And so he says, what's the midah we have to take from Hashem is to be savlanut, is to have tolerance. And like he finishes off the first midah, ve'im kol zeh lo yesef tevos min mekabel, don't withhold. So this is the first midah. If anyone wants to share any insight that they feel or questions, this is a good time.
I have a question, Mendy. Oh,
go ahead.
Galit is here with me, and Shimon is also listening.
Sure.
So my question is that, we now understand what that midah is of being tolerant and patient, which 100% I am not, by the way. So that was ready-made for me. Anyway, so we're hearing what the subject is and what the midah is, but is this text going to tell us, or is it up to us how to implement it in our life? Because I'm hearing it very, very clearly, and you give a beautiful class and the text is amazing, but it's like hearing these vocabulary words, but how does one implement it, particularly when you're so practiced in not exactly doing that?
I hear you saying. Well, I think see, you have to remember something. As it goes along, he's going to explain more. But what he's going to do in at least the first few midos, this is just the beginning of it. It gets worse. Meaning to say, when I mean it gets worse, is it gets better really. But meaning to say that it gets harder. And meaning
it's a high bar, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So and this is just the beginning. It gets harder. It gets higher. Meaning to say is right now we're talking about feeding the person that's misusing it, but we haven't yet got into the idea of feeding the sin itself, to give life to the sin itself, which is the next midah, which is nosa oven, to tolerate the sin as opposed to tolerate the person. And you ask a very good question. You ask a very good question. The Ramak is basically telling us what you should do, but he's not telling us how to do it. And he doesn't actually discuss it. And I'm sure there could be many people that in the pirushim of the Tomar Devora could give their own insight. But in the wording of the Ramak, I mean, one can maybe analyze deeply every word. And I think the key. I think that's why the key word over here is tolerance. Is that is not to focus on there's the elbow, there's the transgression, the insult, and not just the insult. Obviously, the insult you're doing something. You're literally feeding the person and giving the person the koach, like the case where God gives us koach and we use it against them. And not only there's two points of this midah. One is to tolerate it, and the other one is to continue to give. A person could be, a person can say, "Call me stupid once, call me stupid twice, call me stupid three." You're not going to call. Enough. I did it. How many times are you gonna do it now? And the tall order is even harder because Hashem is Hashem, and we're not Hashem. We're not perfect, and that's so. What the Ramak is expecting of a person is that if you are in the image of Hashem, even though we have the struggles, that it's not easy for us. I mean, it's not natural for us to respond this way. It's not natural for anyone to respond this way. The person to not just to accept, but to accept and to continue to give. It's literally like feeding. So a lot of people say it's unhealthy to do that, and it could be. We're not talking about it. This is not an absolute case. Obviously, in a way that you're damaging the person by continuing to feed them. I don't mean food, but to feed them energy, whatever it is that they're using, that you're giving them. He says, yes, if tavasa, don't hold back from being kind to this person. But that's not, he's not going into that. He's going into the idea of a person getting offended. and getting hurt, and he's saying just you can't be that way. You can't. Now, how does one work on that? What are the exercises we could do? We could discuss this. You're right. This is not easy. It's not easy to, but I think the ABCs of it is the resolution, commitment a person makes to be tolerant. It means I think when you see, sometimes it's good to know what is required. Not so much and then how is another thing, but not always does the person know what is required. And what is required, I think, over here is what he's saying is the savlonis, is the tolerance. Tolerance means is that you tolerate. It's okay to tolerate. And a lot of people start off with having a problem is because they don't think it's okay to tolerate. A lot of people say it's not good. It's not. I mean, how could I? What am I saying about myself if I'm so tolerant to other people like this? So it becomes there's a lot of insecurity enclosed in why we're not tolerant. And so the Ramak is saying it's okay to be tolerant. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay to be tolerant. Don't think that tolerance is a sign of weakness.
Yeah. So it's like it's the starting roadmap, and it's where we're going to go with it. But at least we have the words, we have the definitions, and we have the Mindos that then the next step, however it comes, will either be further study or delving into ourselves.
Yes. So yes. And I think we could go away with this Mida, and we're going to have a shorter class today because I have to get ready for another class. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose the momentum. But I think that what we could go away with today is on the Mida of tolerance of Kel, and what's interesting is that the word Kel is koach, and it takes a strong person to be tolerant. And don't and like in every exercise, don't underappreciate what you have to do sometimes to be a good person and to be a giving person, and know that it takes a lot of strength to be tolerant. The word kel is strong, is koach. Mm-hmm. So koach is strength, and it takes a lot of strength to be tolerant. And the Ramak is saying that it's okay to be tolerant, and it's okay to use your strength that you have for something like that, and don't feel like it's a lot of times we question ourselves. We're not sure how to react to a situation, and we initially could react by giving and being tolerant. Then we say, wait a second, what's that say about me? How's the person viewing me? What kind of impression am I giving other people about my behavior? So the Ramak saying it's okay to be tolerant, and it takes a lot of strength to be tolerant. And it's and kudos, like they say, kudos to you that you can be tolerant. And when a person tolerance again, so when you have tolerance, and then your decisions are made in a different way, and your reaction are in a different way. And he says on top of that, not just to tolerate a situation, but to continue to give. Continue to give is basically the Midah has two components. I mean, continue to give is like, it's like mamish, just like that couple. A lot of people, it's not hard, it's not easy. And then you tell yourself, and it's an exercise, like everything else is an exercise. How do you react? You have to, when you make a commitment to be tolerant, then when you start facing case by case situation, you hopefully, like in any exercise, you're stronger and stronger. You're using this koach to react properly. And you have the smallest things, like you have tzedakah. In tzedakah, it's very hard. A lot of people, it's very hard to be tolerant in tzedakah when people ask and ask again, or what have you, or if you're in shul, you could go to in Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem, it's in Yerushalayim, you could go to shul and you'll encounter 30 people, one davening who are coming for tzedakah, and it takes a lot of tolerance. Not you come to shul daven and you feel like you're being disturbed, and you have to make the decision I always find it, to me, I'll give an example. For me, I find it a very hard exercise is when I get stressed out before Shabbos. It's Shabbos, you're running, and if you're working, you're doing a lot of things, and you're walking home, usually, walking home from your office or from wherever I'm coming from, and I'm holding bags. My hands are, my hands are falling out of my shoulders. And someone sees you walking like that. I mean, you're just trying to get home and says, well, could you give me tzedakah, right? So in order for you to give tzedakah, you have to put your bags down. You have to they see what they see but that's, and you have to, it takes a lot of exercise to not get upset and not to, and even if you give, to give with the sever panim, to give with a nice face. But he's not just discussing tzedakah. He's talking about relationships. It's not just the giving of tzedakah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Trust me,
It's,
I have this, what's the word? Struggle. Oh, it's my basic personality. It's my basic personality, being
Who
totally
does-
intolerant of morons. But I see how I have to work on this.
yeah. So that's that. So that, and again, so if you stop here, you feel okay that you make a commitment today to be tolerant, and then you learn next week that's not just good enough to be tolerant. You have to feed the sin.
Oh, yeah.
That's even
Well,
harder.
thank you so much, Mandy. It's an amazing class. I love it so
You,
much.
you, you're welcome, and thanks for coming on short notice for a change of time. Next week, Bez Hashem, regular time, Wednesday at
Sure.
8.
Okay, I would
Laila
like
Tov.
some time to also sponsor a class.
Okay, Baruch Hashem.
But
Let me
you
know.
let me know how to do that, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Laila
take
Tov,
care.
everyone. Take it. Take
Have
it.
an easy, meaningful, have an easy
Um,
fast.
Amen.
Easy
You
fast.
too.
They
You
may
too.
not have it fast.
Yeah,
Bye.
amen. Bye.